issue.
I was living in Washington with Sarah McClendon in the Kennedy Warren before the election. If you will remember, a plane went down on his birthday.
On whose birthday?
Clinton's.
Okay.
I mean, I believe it was a plane. There was a traumatic... I went to his he had birthday parties at 7 different places. It was his 50th birthday. The birthday party in Washington, he was not there. He was in, I think, New York or some other place. But I went to the birthday party, which was in the Kennedy Warren, in the basement of the Kennedy Warren.
Okay.
A friend of mine went into the birthday party. The point is, that night, I remember it vividly, there was a psychological terror thing for Clinton. It was either his plane that went down, something happened that night that was meant to say, don't enjoy this birthday, buddy. Remember, we told you don't run. George Shultz came all the way from wherever he was. Sarah told me this. George Shultz came all the way from, I think it was California, to meet with Clinton before the election to say, don't you dare run. You're going to get it if you run. I know it. And that's from Caspar Weinberger is the guy who's the evil one. Caspar Weinberger pulls a lot of strings. He's the one because Caspar Weinberger is involved with a lot of the weapons and drug dealers, the hit squads that are run, the motorcycle gangs that Tedson Myers runs, who was William Colby's law partner, who just happened to meet me when I was with Sarah at the Smithsonian party, Marine, 4th Marine, who they have this hit squad, motorcycle gang in Europe and everywhere. They call it a motorcycle society. But who runs it? Retired military guys. And just after they meet up at Caspar Weinberger's place up in Maine, Consuela Rice and Tedson Myers and one of the lawyers that Marianne Poore knows, the Motorcycle Society. Well, ask yourself, what do? What happens right after the Motorcycle Society meets? Now they'll probably get this and find out, well, we've got to change the time when our Lady Diana is murdered. They have, because I read all the newspapers. I go into Barnes and Nobles, and of course they're going to cut out all the news and stuff. But they had a minor war in the Netherlands or wherever. They had another attack by motorcyclists on Cyprus. In other words, it's stirring up trouble, murdering people so that they'll sell the weapons. Absolutely. There's no question she was murdered. I knew and sort of went out with a guy named Richard Ord.
Okay.
I later found out he was married. It was when I was single. He was Prince Charles's bodyguard. It's like I also went out with a guy who was divorced, a Marine who was MacArthur's wife's bodyguard.
Okay.
Who turns out to be an assassin, a Marine assassin, who's living in Virginia Beach, I think, now. But I didn't see the connection with Marines and information. Do you know what I'm saying? It's kind of I didn't know how organized it all was. So I praise God in a way. I don't praise God that his mind is destroyed and that he's a brutal, he hates women kind of, but I think, I praise God for everything I've gone through and that their wives are involved with it. The husbands take off. They go to the Eastern Shore or the closest they can to get away from Virginia Beach.
Mm-hmm.
But they die. There's a homosexual clique on Virginia Beach that I know about very well, which has to do with the Coast Guard, and it's a long story. But the point is, I don't know whether they're the ones who murdered Randy, but I suspect that Randy Tate was murdered. George Heilig is another one I suspect who was murdered, who was a delegate, very powerful guy, honest. He died, very young. And Dick Obenshain, who was an honest candidate for governor. And Dick Obenshain, Dick Obenshain was running for governor. He was the Republican candidate. He was an honest, honorable guy. Mysterious plane crash.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens after Dick Obenshain's plane crashes? Well, they have a little convention. It's conveniently right before the convention. You know, he's the titular guy. Well, Elizabeth Taylor comes into the picture. And never before, they just go right over Robert's rules and everything else. Elizabeth Taylor goes around, movie star goes around and says, I think you ought to nominate my husband. Well, he hasn't even been involved in the process. Dick Obenshain, who's honest, conveniently dies. John Warner comes right in there. They did not want Dick Obenshain in there because he was not controllable.
Warner was.
Same thing with Paul Tribble, who's a cousin of mine. Oh, I'm a Waring, and his family are Warings, and we're related. Mm-hmm. Paul was married to Rosemary Tribble. Well, there were some things that were going on, thinking that, in other words, Paul Tribble could not really totally be controlled. He was, they got rid of him. Rosemary knew a lot of stuff, and they get rid of the good guys. Mm-hmm. Well, the Marine Corps are the assassins. The Marine Corps are the assassins for the mob. If you look at guys who've been in 4 years, let's just take Tedson Myers, for example. Now, he's a very nice person to talk to. He was involved with the founding of the Peace Corps with Sergeant Shriver. He's from the Brooklyn Bayonne mob. Came from that group. Mm-hmm. They sent him to Ohio State. Then his 4th year, as I understand it, he did something like truck driving school. Then he goes into Korea and becomes UDT. And then they underwater demolition. In other words, assassin. Mm-hmm. He's very smooth. He marries a high-level gal, Sullivan. The mob in Virginia, Virginia Beach, is very, very strong, very well organized and connected with the military. The military is the mob. The Marine Corps they're the assassins for the mob. They may only be in, as Tedson Myers was, for 4 years, but the individuals then go on to truck driving, truck loading school. They're always loading things and, moving things around. But then they send him to Harvard Law School. Mm-hmm. Then he winds up, when I met him, or just actually, I met him after Colby's murder. But I find it rather unusual that I had spoken with William Colby, the head of the CIA, mm-hmm. who knew my husband well, who told me on the phone all of this stuff about the Phoenix program and Israel, and all of that stuff was coming out, and that he was going to be doing it. He was an insider who was involved. He knew about my husband's involvement with Krulak, Victor Krulak, Al Gray, the Russian double agent who was, I believe, Czechoslovakian or Georgian, who was called the Commissar, who was running everything in Vietnam. He was the murders, the assassinations. My husband was involved with the murders, the assassinations. He was involved with teams that did that. They were training boys to kill. It's a sick, sad, little adolescent boy cycle. These are not grown up. These are little men from Oz. That's what I call them. Al Gray is a sick little man. He was the former commandant of the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. Carl Mundy is a sick, pathetic, lying little man, former commandant of the Marine Corps. Then you have Krulak, who is a son of an agent, of a double agent, Victor Krulak. Not American. These are men who the Constitution is just beneath them. People like me, their wives, and